That should be fun.
Oh gosh. So wow. Yeah. So
I guess we're on.
I think we're on. Okay.
Just realized I get camera shy.
Where do we look? Yes. Oh yeah, you're super camera shy. I believe that right now.
Yeah. You should have seen me trying to make a selfie earlier.
For the first time on your iPad. Oh my God, that was absolutely classic. They actually turned out really, really well. Just go look on Twitter if you see the picture.
Yeah, there was no thumb. There was that one. The other 83.
I think like half of my finger ended up making it to that one. So yeah, we do good technologies. That is what we do.
All right. So if you're joining us on YouTube Live, hello. I'm Jessy Irwin. A lot of people know me as Jessy Rex. I yell about security things on Twitter. I also have a security job, but forget that. I'm hanging out with my favorite security lady, Tarah Wheeler, and she is Principal Security Advocate at Symantec. Today we are at Hacker Dojo in Santa Clara. We will not give you any terrible stories about how long it took me to get here in the traffic.
You didn't kill anybody, did you?
I'm a little sore about it still.
I'm disappointed. Yeah.
But we're also here to talk about Chrome56, which is a new fancy thing that's coming to our Google browsers in the next year. And there are all kinds of new important tools that developers, and I think users too, because I love the users, need to know about. So I'm going to lob it over to Tarah for our first ever Security Ladies Talk Show.
Security Ladies Talk Show, and oh my God. So we haven't figured out yet who is the Kathy Lee and who is the Hoda. Although I like your suggestion better. We have an Ethel and Lucy thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's Lucy and who's Ethel. That might switch every 15 seconds. But that's a thing.
So the reason that we're actually sitting here talking right now is I am, like we know, at Symantec, and these lovely folks have given me enough rope to hang myself, and we're just experimentally going to throw some information out there for people about Chrome56 and the upcoming, I call it #BrowserApocalypse, mostly because it is a real change, a sea change, I think, in the way that encryption is treated by default on the internet, and it's an awesome change. I'm super supportive of this. We love to see additional encryption, good encryption, being required in browsers. So here's what's going on. Chrome is the world's largest browser by market share. And coming up in January, they're going to be requiring for websites that take personal information, HTTPS or TLS certificates, specifically encryption everywhere. And we love our encryption. Do we love encryption? We love encryption.
Encrypt all the things.
Encrypt
that
every
makes
one of the things.
The ones that make sense.
Yes, but good encryption, which is why we're here to talk today about if you're someone who's going to be affected by this change coming up in Google Chrome. This is going to be something that really affects, I think, what Jessy and I want to talk to and the people we want to talk to today. We want to talk to especially those developers who are going to get kind of panic phone calls sometime around January saying, oh my God, people showing up at my site are leaving because it says I'm not secure. What do I do? So we're going to talk to you. I have a personal a background as a general web developer who's had personal clients before in the space of getting stuff to work properly on the internet. And so I have a lot of sympathy for people who get a call from a client and just have to go and Google for the information. Hopefully, this is going to be something that gives you the tools that you need to fix what your clients are going to see coming up in January of 2017.
Or your marketing team when they get really upset and see some bounces in your Google Analytics. Or your support team when they start getting 5,000 emails and good things don't happen when the support team queues get big. So first off, when is all of this going to start? Do we have a date? Do we know? Should we all be setting clocks and calendars? Do I need to make a little fort?
Get a fort, and also Costco has this deal apparently on 365 days worth of meal supplements. So I would go for those.
Perfect. Crypto browser apocalypse thing.
Crypto browser apocalypse thing. Absolutely.
What's the date?
So it looks like January. If I'm going to guess, I'm going to say that it's January 31st. We're not sure on that one, but you can see in the Chromium developer calendar that Chromium's stable 56 release is going to come out January 31st. So there's no reason to think that Chrome's update is going to come sooner than the open source version of Chrome itself. And then we can talk about what the differences are and why that happens. I certainly see that the open source or alpha adopter version of a browser often comes out at least a little bit before the proprietary version does. Like how Firefox sometimes waits for Tor to do updates and finds out what security issues have come up before doing a major Firefox release. So there's no reason not to think that that's going to be pretty similar this time.
Cool. Cool. That's good to know. So around January 30th, we should all be prepared and maybe keep an eye out for funny things to happen. What do we need to know in advance? What are some of the things that we should be looking for, expecting, planning for, and maybe even changing development cycles for?
If I was going to have a conversation with somebody who's going to hit a website that takes personal information after January 31st of this coming year, well, period at this point, I would say if you start seeing error messages, it is likely, if you take a look at some of the research out there, it's likely there's going to be a big red bang in your URL bar. It can be a little bit more prominent even than that. The question of whether or not interstitials are going to come up is still kind of an open one at this point. But if I was going to explain to a developer or to a business owner what might happen to their website, I would say if you take passwords, personally identifiable information, credit card information, one of the things you can expect is that even if you have an encrypted page where you take that information, if customers land on your site, the landing page is not encrypted, your users may see a warning saying this site isn't safe, this site doesn't protect your information, doesn't use encryption. So we're anticipating that that's going to be something like a text search over those pages, that the bot crawlers are simply going to look at, I would anticipate any page that has something like a password label sitting next to a text field.
Definitely the password labels, yes. There's been a lot of good work on sniffing out passwords and trying to unify the experience for that. Make sure you're not sending plain text. Plain text passwords.
Yeah. Can we do some form validation and no plain text passwords? And that's part of the reason why it matters. It's not just a question of whether or not you're encrypting traffic back and forth from the browser that is the client to the web application server and back again. It's also whether or not in that web application the kinds of personally identifiable information like credit cards, passwords, and things like that are being protected appropriately when sent as messages. So yeah, that's what we're anticipating is going to happen. And I'm also anticipating a lot of people not understanding why their favorite smaller retail websites aren't working anymore. Or think they're not working.
I think that makes total sense. In my experience with developers, I've been on really tiny teams, I've been on really big teams.
Sure.
Sometimes the tiny team figures out the best ways to get information flowing and fix something in advance. Sometimes the big teams do. And regardless of what your development cycle is, do you think there are going to be some ways that this might impact smaller shops harder than larger shops or web agencies?
I think web agencies often get the kind of information they need to at least know stuff like this is coming up in advance. And I think one of the things that small shops are going to need to know is first how to implement encryption. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But what we need to kind of warn you about is you're probably going to get some panic phone calls. So small businesses are going to see people, possibly even have people call them up and say, do you realize your website's not working? The site owner may not realize that a change needed to be made to keep their site working. Normally, I think we think about websites as working until they don't or going out of date. In reality, what's happening with your browser is not that your website doesn't work anymore. It's that your website is a piece of information that lives out there on the internet. And when someone reaches out to access it, especially one of your customers, what you end up finding out is the browser is the client that reaches out to touch that server. And because Chrome is the biggest client to reach out and get information from a web server, what will happen is that people who have a website that works perfectly, at least up until now, and have never had any kind of security breach, may not realize their customers are being warned off. So if you possibly can, I would probably just as a check, over the course of January, at least once or twice a week, try to hit your own website if you are a small business owner. Try to hit the websites of the small businesses, the customers that you as a web developer are servicing, and find out whether or not any of them are showing major error messages. Customers aren't necessarily on the internet sophisticated enough to tell the difference between this website may not be protecting your information and a website which requires a security exception. So part of the problem with that is that if you're someone who is touching one of these sites, Customers don't necessarily see the difference between one big red error message and another big red error message. They'll just assume it's broken.
That's
right?
true, and there's also a really big difference between a website being safe for users and a website being secure for users. A lot of that's about who your audience is and a little bit about who's building it. I think these are really important points though, because if you think of how small merchants tend to work, a lot of people might hire someone within their community or down the street to take care of a website, or they might decide to launch something on WordPress on their own and add a customized e-commerce module. So things not working will cost money, and sometimes the people who are in charge of a website may not have all of the crazy technical engineering skills that might be required, or at least the depth of knowledge to really jump in and get their hands dirty on the encryption piece.
Yeah.
So we sort of talked a little bit about encryption being amazeballs. I mean, I'm just going to say it. But we should probably talk about how you do it if you are a web developer. It's kind of a big deal. It's the thing that makes sure that any information that goes from here to wherever in the cloudy thing is private and secure and protected, as long as you're using the modern stuff and the strong stuff. But where do you get started if you're a dev?
If you're a dev, the first question that you ask yourself is, what is the web server that you're dealing with? Well, the most common ones are going to be web servers like Apple's OS server. You can be looking at IIS out of Windows, Apache or Nginx on any of the Linux boxes, probably the Debian servers. And what happens when you look and find out what your web server is you'll start at that moment. Hopefully, you as a developer will be able to, at that point, Google search in Chrome, because it would be kind of funny to do that at the same time. Find out where certificates need to be installed. So here's the process of getting a certificate installed on your website. The first thing that you do is find out where it needs to go. The second thing you need to do is go and get one. We'll talk about where you can go and get one in a moment. I love.
We have some good shopping options for this.
Excellent. Yes, shop the look for your way. This is gonna get fun.
I'm just saying, Marc Jacobs' 2017 Winter Crypto Collection is the place to go.
I do love it. Well, yeah, but SHA-1 is super out this year is what I hear. SHA-2 is the new SHA-1?
Yeah.
New black.
By Felicia.
By Felicia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay.
That's
you have
ridiculous.
to figure out where to buy your certificates from. And then there's some other stuff that's really important.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other stuff. And we'll get back to the shopping trips. Sorry.
Here's a good way to check. So when you have a web server that is pushing information out, serving information out to any of the clients that want to touch it, you're usually going to find that that server is pushing information out on port 80. One of the fastest ways to find out if your site is actually encrypted or not is ping and find out whether or not port 443 is actually serving information as well. Sometimes you'll have sites that can serve over both 80 and 443. What we're going to recommend is that you cease essentially serving that information by default on port 80 and go to 443. This is where you're going to get most browsers recognizing that you're serving up an encrypted site, a TLS site. How do you tell that that's happened? You look up in your browser in your URL bar and see, instead of an HTTP ://twitter.com is what I'm looking at right now, you'll see HTTPS ://Twitter. Here's how, yes, and that's how you see it. We love that S. Now, you can also, and this is really handy in Chrome, go ahead and mouse over the URL bar, and you'll be able to see a little padlock there. And believe it or not, we've in the security industry just joked about this forever. Putting a padlock on your website doesn't make it secure. But this padlock, the one that you're going to see up in the URL bar, the one that you see in Firefox, in Chrome, in any major browser now, is good as gold. You want to see that padlock. It means that your site is encrypted. Green is even better than plain. So what you're talking about at that point is a TLS certificate, an encryption certificate that's been verified even further than just finding out if you own your domain name or not. And it's a good idea to take this and have your website verified that, and have your site verified even further than just the domain name, especially if you are providing or handling personally identifiable information. So the next thing that you do is you find out where on your particular branded server you're going to install the cert. It's going to be under probably SEN. It's going to be under the web server for that's on the server that you have that is actually serving the information. Let me back that up a little bit. The way that you install the cert is find the web server, figure out where under your web server a cert gets installed. Then start checking to find out whether or not port 443 is actually open and ready to serve. Then you'll open the port, you'll check to make sure your firewall rules are set. I'm personally experienced doing this only on Debian, to be frank. I've done quite a bit of it on Debian.
It's also different for everyone.
It
So
is.
in general, just like any other kind of software class or process, there's things you look for and tasks you look to accomplish. Not always going to be in the same order. That's okay. Let's not argue about what's better than the other. Just saying. But if you look for those things in general, you should be fine. All right, so can we talk about where we can go shopping for our service?
Yes, we can.
Because this is very important. This one of the hardest things, especially if you are super non-technical and you're in charge of a website, is first of all trying to figure out why the S is better than not having the S with the HTTP, and then second of all, trying to get there. Because a couple of years ago, I remember a lot of people trying to do write-ups of how to roll out HTTPS, and it would be a 37 to 42 step process. Sometimes you have to pay, sometimes you have to wait, sometimes you get caught in some sort of weird automation queue with customer service. Total nightmare. And in the past 24 months, it has vastly improved. We have literally had a crypto cert raining down from the sky party, and it's been wonderful.
It is wonderful.
So let's talk about where to get the best ones.
Absolutely. Well, Symantec is clearly a location you can go to if you want to get a great entrance certificate. There are a lot of other what they call certificate authorities out there. One of them might be Let's Encrypt, which is an open source encryption option out there. There's less help, so you'll often look at the more service you get with the certificate, the easier it often is to interface with your site and get it installed. For those of you that want to be brave and intrepid explorers, go for it. Go for Cloudflare, go for Let's Encrypt. Go for one of the more technical options that are out there.
Yeah, those are really cool. I know with Let's Encrypt, it's also very highly automated. So when you are talking about support and service, sometimes you have to either know where to go on Twitter, who to ask. I see my friends who are working on Let's Encrypt constantly answering questions over Twitter, so it's cool. But if you are not as brave, it's fine. I am not always that brave. There are always other options, and sometimes you might find that you need multiple certificates, which is a whole other deal that we won't get too into.
I will say
But
that
the whole process is so much better.
Yeah. It's a lot better than it used to be. I remember trying to install certs 10 years ago, and instructions themselves on the internet were actually pretty thin at that point. It was often assumed that if you were buying a cert, you already know what to do with it, or that it was going to be done for you.
Yeah.
So,
And
so if you
that's a really big deal.
I highly recommend if you want to get a good deep dive into the nature of certificates and website encryption, that you go and do it yourself. And if you want it to sort of just work, definitely go with one of the bigger certificate authorities that are out there. And then Symantec is there for providing that kind of support for small businesses, for everybody on the enterprise.
Silly but operational thought I have coming up. When you're getting a cert, sometimes you need stuff. You have to have certain kinds of information and certain kinds of access and certain configurations ready to go when you're either live with someone on Twitter or live with someone on email. So what kind of stuff? I make sure I have it right in front of me and be ready to do. Like how long should I expect this to take? I know that could depend.
That does depend, but I will say that the very first thing that you want is actual control over the domain. If you're somebody
You have to own it.
Yeah, you have to
need
own
to own it.
You gotta own that.
Please own it the polite way, not go through the back door. Let's not go into the vault.
No, the first thing you need to have is ownership of the domain. Here's often how you'll prove ownership of the domain. You will go and log into whatever your domain DNS manager is. For instance, I actually buy a lot of my domains through GoDaddy, and so I just use their DNS zone manager.
I think I use Hover, so I
Hover,
have some cool stuff.
Yeah. So what you're often going to do is you're going to prove that you have control of that website by editing or maybe adding a text field into the domain name record for your website, so that the DNS server, domain name service, can start to push that information out to the world. When you can verify by putting in like a "Hi, I'm Tarah, I own this website" text field in your DNS in your zone file, that will often indicate to someone else on the other end of the conversation about buying encryption for you that you're actually the person who owns the website. And that's the very first thing you're going to want to have. Have the ability to prove that. Often they will give you a string of letters and numbers that you'll need to paste into the text field, and then an automated process will start where they verify that that has happened like 24 hours later.
Yes.
You want to set your time to live very low on that. Set it to like 30 minutes, and the reason why is if your DNS is not cycling often enough to update your public DNS record, you are going to end up without the information that they need on the site by the certificate authority who's verifying your identity. So,
cool. Yeah, I personally have not had a ton of experience setting up certs, but if you are super not technical, it can be very hard. If you have a very highly technical kid who does things to your Wi-Fi you don't understand, I don't know, maybe get a little bit of help. Those kids these days are pretty good.
They are. When I think of this entire issue, what I often think of is if I was by myself and I had like 15 small business clients, I was running like a hosting shop in the middle of the United States. I lived in Montana. I got a degree there in international relations, and I ended up doing a little bit of web work while I was there. If I was the person that small retailers or the local deli was using to maintain their website, and those companies were using this kind of information, the thing that I would want to know is this. First of all, can I get access to who owns those domains? It should be the business owner, but it may be you who's retaining the password or information for the website. Please be aware, small business owners, that as far as the legal provision of that website is concerned, if you've given that information to a developer, your developer now, in the eyes of a certificate authority, owns that domain. So do be cautious about who you give your passwords to when it comes to your own domains.
Yeah, I think I always call it OPSEC. It's not really operational security, but from a business continuity standpoint, having these things mapped out in a contract is really important. I also am quite a stickler for making sure there are unique passwords and two-factor authentication on everything. So you were mentioning going into your DNS company.
Yes.
Make sure if you are a small business and you trust someone else with this information, that they can show you in some way that they are following at least the bare minimum stuff you're supposed to do so that you don't get easily popped on the internet.
Yeah.
That's really important, because if your developer gets owned and you don't have passwords and you don't know exactly how to clean up what happens, ugly, bad things can persist.
Have you heard of times when people have let their domains lapse or lost access to them? If you lose access to a domain, it's very unlikely that you'll get it back again, to be perfectly frank. If you let your domain expire, you don't have the login information, the sign-in information, you've just lost the domain. And to be honest, if you're a small business owner, you're running a retail shop, you're running a restaurant, something like that, who you are on the internet is you. So make sure and protect your domain, and this is one of the ways to do it. That extended validation process for getting a good certificate for your website is how you can additionally prove that you own the site. So start by being able to prove it at all. And the two-factor verification that Jessy is going to certainly be able to elaborate on even more. I'm a web nerd.
I like
She's
to
a
call
password
it,
nerd.
I like to call it two-raptor because I kind of love dinosaurs, and the two raptors will meet the person trying to get into your account on the internet. Sorry, it's just how I get the kids excited about it. But making sure that people are following those best practices is really important. There are certain business elements that have nothing to do with what browser you're using or what editor you're using as a dev, but how information goes back and forth and how ownership is really defined, and making sure that those are spelled out well if you're a small business is absolutely vital. That is just a thing. It is 2016, almost 2017. It's like breathing air.
It's time to figure out your passwords at this point. So.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
So now
if your password, by the way, has pumpkin spice or chestnut praline, we are not friends right now. Make a better password. No Starbucks passwords.
Yeah, don't be basic.
Unless you're a programming language.
Unless you Can we keep telling really bad jokes like this on the internet? Is that a thing that you do now?
I don't see anyone tweeting ugly things at us yet, so I think we're good.
Oh, come on. Somebody's got to tweet something. Yeah.
Now, my WhatsApp, that's a different story.
Okay.
So I am poking through, my core iMessage has questions in it too. What are some of your favorite things that are coming up about this particular release of Chrome56? What are you most excited about?
So one of the major issues with security on the internet, and part of the reason why Chrome and Chromium are two different browsers, is Chrome has more security built in since they've included a native or a built-in PDF viewer and a Flash viewer. An extraordinary, and I'm going to say overwhelming majority of malware on the internet is Flash rootkits. So Chrome is being very careful with its users' safety by making sure that there's total control of that Flash viewer within Chrome. It's nothing but serious admiration for the Chrome security team. The thing that I'm probably personally most excited about is that this is going to wake people up. Seeing that error message about websites that aren't protecting user information the way they should, I think it's going to start a bigger conversation about why we need to have encryption everywhere. And that bigger conversation is the one that's interesting. You know, we're technologists. We can make a lot of stuff happen on the internet. The big question is why we're doing it, not whether or not we can, but whether or not we should. What is the implication of it? And I think it's going to wake a lot of folks up to the fact that the internet is no longer a frontier. It is the place that we do business. It's not real life on the internet anymore. This is as important as making sure that people don't take pictures of your checkbook or of getting a hold of your bank account information.
Yes.
Yeah. So that may be information somebody could get, you know, just like you can get someone's DNA and fingerprints.
It's true.
You know, reasonably easy, except for the part where en masse DNA and fingerprints can be a very difficult matter. And in the same sort of way, encrypting everything on all of your traffic back and forth from web servers, which is what these browsers are now trying to do, especially certainly congratulations to Chrome for pushing this out there, is really starting a conversation about how the internet is not different than real life. This is where we store our money. This is where we have friends. This is where we have conversations with people. And you as a developer need to be pushing encryption on your clients to protect them. Your clients, the small businesses out there, and any company you could possibly imagine needs to be protecting its users as well. And if they're not, we need to start having a conversation about why they're not. I'm going to strongly advocate that we get the certificates installed before Browser Apocalypse 2017 happens.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to take care of it in advance than it is to clean up and then re-educate perhaps a couple thousand users who showed up to your website who saw a big red thing and didn't know what it meant, but now have a trust problem and maybe don't want to go back. I have another question for you from the interwebs.
Wonderful.
So there's a lot of conversation going on about encryption. We know that it can be a tool that helps people who are trying to accomplish good, but sometimes it gets used against others for evil. How do you feel about that? Is that something that we need to continuously think about with some of the changes in Chrome as well?
I will, as a privacy advocate and frankly activist, I'm going to say, yeah, exactly. I am going to say that I think we should always default to protecting people and letting them make their own individual choices about their behavior. Is it true that tools out there can be used for ill? Absolutely. You can make every piece of technology we have is a tool. We can use any of these tools for good or for ill. And I'll say that there are a lot of folks who use the tools we're using right now, YouTube, Twitter, the internet, frankly, whatsoever, to spread hate, to spread problems. And just because there is a subset of people that will use a tool poorly or even correctly, but for bad reasons, doesn't mean the rest of us should lose access to it. So there's a reason why it's important for this kind of protection to be available and default for everyone, because it shouldn't just be, in this case, it shouldn't just be the bad guys that have crypto. How about that?
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I tend to think about it a lot less as the internet is this thing you can't see, and a lot more like the real world. You know, if people built houses in a way that gave protection to good guys and bad guys, would we stop having houses?
Yeah.
I don't think so. We would still have them. We might make some rules.
Sure.
But it's a really interesting conversation. It's one that will probably go on until the end of time.
I agree.
Maybe after we get those quantum crypto computer machiney things.
Okay.
Which brings me to my next Tell me. What have I seen?
Have you seen Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal? Did you see the it was like 2 days ago. The comic was magnificent. It was about quantum computing, and it was, have you had the talk with your kids about quantum computing yet, and the whole thing is just
Oh my
brilliant.
gosh, I need to have kids so I can practice.
Well, you can practice with the quantum computing talk. That other talk is probably going to be way less awkward. So it's absolutely brilliant. Like, stop thinking that quantum computing is the solution to everything. It's not. You know, and also quantum computing is not a math problem, it's an engineering problem. And we could keep going on this clearly forever.
Yes.
But the point being, tools are out there and they should be used well by people who have the skill to use them and in a way that protects people. There's a lot of, the best example I can give in this moment is probably access to protesting. Or access to law enforcement. Just because law enforcement uses some of the same tools as the bad guys use doesn't mean we don't want to have law enforcement anymore, or that we want them ill-equipped or unable to handle what's going on. So this is about you as a small business, as a developer, as a security specialist, understanding that at the end of January, you're going to get overwhelmed with people not knowing what just happened to their websites. So you get it done now, it's going to save you a lot of time, and also you're not going to be in those long-ass hold queues waiting to talk to folks, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be worse than, this is a terrible example, but I remember about a year and a half ago, Snapchat changed their user interface. And all of my friends who are teachers said that every student in the classroom had an absolute meltdown. Don't be those students.
Really?
Yeah.
They did?
They all had meltdown because they didn't know how to make it work. Which is exactly how I would feel if I went to a website and I couldn't just get it to do the thing I wanted it to do because the snacks need to come to my house.
Yeah, snacks need to come. So we're, you know, it's a lot of websites, the big ones, they've already got their act together. You can already go to websites, the big ones that are out there, Facebook, Amazon, Google, these websites, they're already set up with encryption. What we're talking about is folks that haven't had a chance to see that just because their website always has worked doesn't mean it's going to keep working the same way or look the same way over time.
That's
so
true.
Yeah, it's the best example of that.
So I have another question for you.
Oh my gosh, people are actually asking questions.
Yeah.
It makes me feel really
My
good.
stuff is blowing up.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
So what is some of your favorite research that you have seen out there, out and about, since you've done a lot of traveling in the past few months? What's maybe the best talk you've seen? What's the thing you've been the most excited about?
Okay. The thing I am the most excited about security over the last couple of months, so I was at this really awesome web security conference called DeepSec in Vienna, and probably one of the most exciting things I've seen is people get very nervous about the cyber. Very nervous about words like cyber warfare and things like that. And one of the greatest talks I recently saw was a gentleman named Stefan, a professor in Germany, talk about how do we really model where a threat has come from, and comparing it to warfare of the past and figuring out, is cyber warfare actually warfare or not? You know, when you can remotely reach out and stop a power plant from operating and deny power to 50,000 people, you know, that's an infrastructural attack on people. So the question at that point is someone who is when you're defining what cyber warfare is, does it actually rise to the level of warfare, or are we using hyperbole? And the answer is basically, as soon as you can physically hurt people with technology, you've actually reached that level. So, but at the same time, a journalist who, you know, gets harassed on Twitter and, you know, by a nation state or by actors in another country who are upset about a story, is that cyber warfare? No. Not really. Trolling's not cyber warfare.
There is definitely a psychological element, and that's true.
Yes.
So, but what you're really telling me is my plan for all of the self-driving cars to be hacked out of my way. Warfare.
Oh yeah, that's super warfare.
Okay.
Yeah,
no car warfare. Got it.
No car warfare.
Got it. I'll postpone it until.
Warfare.
Okay. I'll postpone that one until later. Okay. So I am just thinking, we've had a really, really busy few weeks in security, and I was thinking we could maybe spend a little bit of time jamming on security news lately.
I love this idea.
There's just a lot of it.
Yeah. Oh, and before we do kind of skip over, because I mean, she and I are going to talk we could talk forever about
11 years.
Let me let folks know at the end of this conversation, I'm going to tweet out a link for any of you who want to go and get a certificate at Symantec for your customer websites. I'm going to tweet that out, and then I'm sure you'll be able to get it from the Symantec media sites too. Search for everybody. Search for you. Search for you.
This is why they shouldn't put this on the internet.
Okay. All right. This is ridiculous. We just now do the giant like Chardonnay bowls at this point, and we're fine.
Yeah.
So I do want to emphasize, we'll just post a link in a little bit so that you can follow through and get some awesome services. Also go for any of the other cloud or certain providers that we've named here too. You know, your mileage is going to vary on basically any product out there, and it's just sliding scale for you about how comfortable you feel installing your own certs, having somebody else do it for you. And certainly, you know, we as developers and technologists like to keep our skill set up, but hey, you can't know everything. You know, you can't be a specialist in everything, and it's okay to get good help.
And I always like to say the whole point of technology, whether you are just someone who's consuming technology, you're a user, you are an average person, a dev, a wizard, engineer, you have choice. So if you want to try something new and play around with it, and it turns out really well, you just learned something new. If you try out something new and you're pulling your hair out and you're screaming at everyone, I too have been there. You can tweet at me and we'll talk it out.
Will not compile.
I will compile you.
I will compile you.
As the person who jokes about brute forcing the computer with furniture, I'm there.
Oh god.
Alright, so
I have thrown this thing across my iPhone. I think I've thrown it across the room at least twice in the last week.
my work iPhone is the 7, and I can take it in the shower.
No.
Yes.
Oh,
I don't actually, because hello, it has a webcam. Why would I take something with the cam in the shower? No. Cover your webcam.
Cover your webcams, yes, that.
But I particularly love that I can, use it in the rain and not worry about it the way I did a decade ago.
Oh yeah.
Remember, if you got one drop of
one drop in,
one drop and it was done. It was done.
I will note that when it comes to security news over the last several months, one of the things that I see happening is just flat security news is hitting above the fold now in a way that has just really changed the dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Now when a company gets hacked, it's no longer a question of whether or not a company with a big, Silicon Valley valuation had an embarrassing moment. It's a question of whether or not your mom's credit card information has been posted on the dark web, and there's a bunch of hackers going after it. And I also want to specify here too, I'm a hacker, Jessy's a hacker. There's a difference between being a bad guy and being a good guy. And so when we talk about hackers and we talk about accessing personal information, there's good and bad reasons to do that. We're talking mostly in this case about preventing the bad reasons for accessing it.
Yeah, a lot of times, this is something that I'm particularly crazy about. I hate seeing when reporters and media confuse the term hacker and criminal, because there is a very distinct difference between the activity that we see. So when we talk about Chrome, for example, when we don't want people accessing your personal data, our kind of hacker, they will find out that you can access the data, but never touch it, because there is this very deep feeling of not wanting to do harm for users.
Responsibility for the internet.
That is very much a sliding scale. Different people have different motivations, but there's a difference between someone who's going to maliciously grab that information and use it for their own thing. It's not about you personally. There's no one sitting in a corner of a coffee shop saying, oh my gosh, that Sarah girl, I'm gonna get her. Not too often. Not too often.
If you're on open Wi-Fi,
that's true.
And
that's true.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons when we say open Wi-Fi, like networks like that, one of the reasons why it's important to have browsers, why websites should be encrypted, is because over open networks, if you are sending unencrypted information, I can sit there and listen to everything you're doing, and I don't have to have a wire plugged into your computer to do this. I can sit there and listen
it's
about
just floating through the air.
It floats, yes, magically floating.
I still hold that there are not enough black hoodie criminal hackers to sit in every coffee shop on the planet and steal everyone's stuff. But the point really is making sure that can't happen, not counting every hacker on the planet, and just double checking that it's not possible.
If we ever get to do this, if anyone is ever mad enough to let us do this again, we need to have Black Hacker Hoodie Day with like a balaclava and everything like that. And then somebody's gonna intro us, and it's gonna be like Hacker Voice. We're in, right?
Can I wear my Christmas sweater with the dinosaurs?
That is not hacker chic. Come on.
Okay, fine.
All right.
Cool. So what are you looking forward to working on the most in the coming year? I have my list.
Yeah.
But I want to hear your list, because my list is get people to not reuse passwords, get people to, not give honest answers to security questions, that kind of thing.
not give honest answers to you. Well, I do love that. There's a personal project I was working on, and that is all of those drop-down questions, like what's your mother's maiden name, that are often security backup verification questions. It doesn't matter how good, and Jessica can go on this one, it doesn't matter how good your password is if everybody knows that your mom's maiden name is Smith.
Yeah.
So it's time to say, people are often blown away. They'll have a great password and they're like, all right, yeah, I'll call into a bank or something like that, and they'll say, okay, and what's your security question answer for what school did you start at? And then they look at it and you can actually hear them go, and I'm like, well, it's a 32-digit long string of random numbers and special characters.
Yeah.
I'm going to begin here, and they're like, okay, but that's secure.
I've had that problem enough where I have stopped telling 1Password that it can just generate my stuff, and I've started switching over to word list.
Really?
So
there
are a few reasons I switched over to that. For one, when you have to actually call in customer support, it's easy to say, my mom's maiden name is gorilla, monkey face, twinkle toes, grapefruit.
I'm reading my KeyPass X file. Stop reading my passwords.
I told you to work on that thing. But I feel like for that particular piece of having to share information, the best thing first is to say, okay, I have a security question and I need to treat it like a second password, but it needs to be a little bit more usable. So for me, the usability is getting a password manager or generating something with dice and a diceware dictionary, or paying that lovely 11-year-old, I think she's 12 now, to make personal diceware security question answers for you. But I particularly like those because you can say the words out loud and it's not as confusing as semicolon 6 / no wait, that was a /, or maybe it's a medium /, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you just actually reminded me of something. I mean, we've got a laptop here, an iPad here, an iPhone here, and another iPhone there. And I think I got one slid down my back somewhere. One of the really interesting things about encryption too is that we're not just necessarily talking about browsers in an overarching sense. There's also encryption and TLS certificates for a lot of the applications that you would use on your website or on your phone now.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting parts about that is mobile applications with decent encryption are actually way harder to listen in on than it would be if you were over a desktop. It has to do with the fact that this machine will run unsigned code and this machine will not run unsigned code. But interestingly, for mobile sites, you often find people have very weak passwords.
Yes.
And it's because it's a pain in the butt to type on your phone.
Well, no one wants to do the thing where you switch between 4 different kind of character sets and keyboards. A couple of operating systems, I'm thinking Android actually is the only one I know of. Well, at 1Password, there was a 1Password keyboard for Android, which was very nice.
I like that.
But it really stinks when, for example, you see a password breach. I typically see this with mobile banking applications, where people have to go through the account creation process and set up a password. They're all lowercase, there are no numbers, there are no symbols, there's not even randomness. It's just whatever appears on that first keyboard. And that really stinks because we are moving so much of what we do from a screen this big with a keyboard to a screen this big with a keyboard this big. And that's a huge, huge problem because the harder we make it for people to be secure or to make a strong security decision, the harder our jobs are all going to be when we have to take care of things. If you're able to really support users using something like a password manager, that's just the song of my people, by the way. But if you can support people who are using tools like that and make it easier for them to log in on mobile, especially if you have a web app as well, and that password's used in the same place, so you can get access, it's really, really important. And sometimes it's a little bit painful. For example, like, one of my favorite things to look at there is there's a lot of good work coming out of Google on their security team for Chrome security, and they do a lot on just usability and what does that red screen that we've been talking about mean, or how do we treat mobile passwords, or how can we make it easier for people to not jump through hoops? Is it appropriate to have a warning, or do you need to make people pass through an interstitial? You know, those pop-up windows where you have to click to continue to go ahead. Yeah. Your users will bounce fast from an interstitial as opposed to just an error message. Yeah. And the question of which is appropriate, that's not just a technical one, that's an ethical one as well. It really depends too on culture. So say you are a business owner and you do a lot with your business, not in the country you live in, but in Canada or Europe or somewhere else. The laws about cookies are a lot different. So you get little banners that you may not get in the US to start with. And then on top of that, what's culturally okay in terms of colors, in terms of wording, in terms of UI, might not be all right in another country or for another group of people.
Security is only as good as the people who choose to use it. And if people don't choose to use something because it's simply not usable, it's not functional, then it doesn't really matter if there's security there. People will find a way, the easiest way to do the task that they want to get done.
Yes.
They can be mandated or required, by their employer to use a certain process. But the truth is, when people hit a website and they're looking for it to be easy, they don't even want to see the security exists. And so we're looking to try to figure out a way to make sure that you, as developers, that you, as people who serve this content, can avoid any of those uncomfortable questions. I will tell you now, there's going to be a lot of noise at the end of January about this happening. We're talking about this early to get you prepared for it. But I do want to answer questions on Twitter in terms of what people are finding as errors or issues. Make sure to throw them in my direction. You can always also tweet SSL support, and that's Symantec website security. We can always answer your questions that way. It's really helpful. We want to keep that dialogue, think about why security matters, why we are so 100% behind this move by Chrome to really push for encryption everywhere.
And how to use all the smart, amazing, gorgeous, modern crypto that's out there.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. And it's lovely to see that people are starting to really understand and care that security, that hackers, that cyber warfare is a more nuanced field than just, oh my God, a bad thing happened. Someone needs to fix it. So it's a nuanced world, and it's becoming more and more important as people trust more and more of their lives to these devices. So credit history, who you are, your relationships, this is all right here.
Yeah, and it's not going to go away from being right there.
It is not. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Throwing them? You guys are throwing all over at Jessy. I love that. She's just like
I'm poking at them.
Okay.
Filtering.
All right, so we'll be on for another 5 minutes or something like that. And what I would love to do is I would love to have anybody who wants to use, what's our little hashtag? It's WebTrust2017. So yeah, ask me and Jessy a question that is about security, but interesting.
Yeah.
Like ask a weird question. Ask us weird questions.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know if you want to challenge our audience
Dear
to
ask us strange things to the best of your ability, as fast as possible. And then mostly because we want to sit back here and spend the last 5 minutes of this broadcast just kind of laughing and falling over for a while. Oh God, it's so awesome. I love the internet. Don't you love the internet?
When it does things I want, like mini snacks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know I seem snack obsessed, but I woke up very early and good snacks were not. They weren't there.
No snacks. I want the good snacks. Amazon Prime is a really wonderful one for the snacks. I'm in a location now where I can get Prime Live Now or something like that. So I can push a button on my phone and ice cream happens to my house.
See, I have a rule where I'm not allowed to use delivery services. If I want something that is not currently at my house for dinner or for dessert, I have to go and get it.
Did you go get it?
So, living in San Francisco, things close early.
Really?
Yeah.
I never really think about that.
I feel like the whole city shuts down at 9 because we're all very busy sandboxing and
I don't think there's every application on earth to get anything that you want in San Francisco. I mean,
but stuff closes. So how do you get the apps? I'm not quite sure yet.
I'm not sure.
But I also I'm in a new office in the best spot right on the edge of the financial district. So I have all the snacks.
Food delivery services.
Right there. There was one little bakery that had these really adorable keys for cookies. Okay. And I wanted to buy all of the key cookies and just go full Oprah on the internet to everyone who told me they started using a password manager in the past year. That's wonderful. There weren't enough cookies. Oh, I could have even generated little passwords for the cookies. Oh, that's cute. Oh, this is terrible.
Session cookies.
Speaking of cute, here too. I have a new way of thinking about passwords. Every time we see a big data breach, everyone talks about, are their passwords out? I feel like if we call them puppies instead of passwords, people are going to be very concerned if puppies get out of the building. People don't. No one will let them out.
Yeah, people don't take it seriously. I mean, I think passwords are seen as this throwaway thing, but I certainly say.
Could you imagine being the guy who literally let 1 billion puppies out? I'm just saying. Everyone would be so mad at you.
It's Godwin's law. I mean, that would like go to Hitler in a comments thread so fast. It would be
It
insane.
would be terrible.
Oh, yeah.
It would be terrible.
I have actually a question. Where'd it go? I have a question from a private message. This is really cool. Okay, so
Okay.
the question that I had is, are you ever going to do this again? Because we want to send in more. Is there a way to submit questions in advance? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should totally do
We should
this
do that.
again. We have to make sure that we followed all the good rules.
Mm-hmm. Do
And
we follow the rules?
Do we have rules?
Do we? I don't know.
We'll figure it out, but we'll make it happen again.
Oh yeah, we'll make rules happen. Hey, we've just been kind of experimenting and exploring, getting good information out there for people who need to know more about what's going to happen this coming year in terms of security, in terms of browsers. It's really exciting stuff, but at the same time, you know, be ahead of the curve when it comes to implementing security on your and other customers' websites.
And it's security, we will always have something to do. It doesn't matter what time of day it is, there will always be a new thing we can improve or harden or break or crack or make stronger.
Well, that's what we do, and it's fun to do it. So, yeah, I hear that. Is there anything else that you can think of?
Yes, I have something that's near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
What are the 3 things you're going to be telling your non-technical family members to do over
Oh,
Christmas?
that is awesome. Okay, so the first thing that I always tell my family members to do is put a passcode on your phone. I don't care if it's 111.
That's how it gets encrypted.
Yes, that's how it gets encrypted. Well, on my
I do
phone,
care if
that's how it
it's
gets
111.
encrypted.
But
Well, but 1111 is Pareto optimally better than no passcode at all.
Yes.
Right? You know, somebody picks the phone up off the street and it doesn't work. You know, most of the time that's a big enough photo that they're not going to be able to hang around with it.
right.
So first of all, put a passcode on your phone. Don't care what it is. The second thing I'm going to tell people is if you don't, and we always be careful because technologists have done this before. It said look for the padlock, and then that became a joke. I'm going to be telling my family and my friends look for that green padlock up in the URL bar before
Yes.
you put your credit card information anywhere.
Green padlocks are in for 2017.
Green padlocks are in. Now we need jewelry so bad. Green padlock jewelry.
I already ordered it.
Oh, how are you even ahead of me? Constantly on every fashion/security trend. Obsessed. Okay, shopping that look next. And the third thing I'm going to tell people is take a deep breath over the cyber. There's a big difference between the kind of hyperbole you're going to see in terms of nation state and actor attacks and what you personally have to fear in terms of your own security. The thing that you should be most afraid of is conveying information about yourself over unencrypted channels because that's easy to listen to. It's the lowest common denominator for getting information about you. So check for that green password, but more than anything else, just check to find out that the people that you are working with and giving your money to are paying attention to whether or not your information is being stored and served and retrieved and used responsibly and securely.
Yeah, I think those are all really, really great points. Pro tip, it's probably not Russia hacking your doorbell.
It's probably not Russia
It's
hacking. No,
It's probably the dog.
Yeah, it's probably the story. It's a true story. I love it.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming and hanging out with us. I know there might have been a couple of audio issues here or there. We will make them better next time,
Sure.
promise.
Absolutely.
And we will hopefully see you again soon with some more security things to yell about.
Yes, I love yelling about security things. This was awesome. Thank you very much. We'll talk later. Bye for now.
Okay. We bantered like crazy.
We bantered.